The evangelist Mark writes, "They came to Jericho, and as Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, 'Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me.' And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, 'Son of David, have pity on me.' Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' So they called the blind man, saying to him, 'Take courage, get up, he is calling you.' He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, 'What do you want me to do for you?' The blind man replied to him, 'Master, I want to see.' Jesus told him, 'Go your way. Your faith has saved you.' Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. This is the truth. Peace be with you." I wanted to start with a few words for any children that happen to be watching. I want to tell you the story of Jericho. So it might be a different city with the same name as Jericho, but in the gospel we hear about a city called Jericho. And I think it's very important for us to know the importance of Jericho. So let's go back in time to the time of Moses, who brought the Israelites out of Egypt. They were supposed to enter into the promised land, to cross the Jordan River, but many of the scouts who went ahead were afraid. They thought there is no way that God, who could do such great miracles, could rescue us this time. The armies of these people are too great. They are too numerous. They are too strong. Their cities have walls around them. So they spent 40 years in the desert. 40 years later, they come back. Moses has died. The majority of the people who were there 40 years before has died, and now the children, the people who were children 40 years ago, they are the leader. The people who were teenagers 40 years ago, they are the leaders. And so the leader is a man named Joshua. And so Joshua wants to cross into the Holy Land. He wants to cross into the promised land. And God tells him to have priests hold the Ark of the Covenant. This was a box that they had made 40 years before to keep in it the 10 Commandments. They kept the 10 Commandments in it, which were a promise of God to them. And so as the priests walk toward the Jordan River, the water divides before them, so that all of the people are able to cross the river on dry ground. And they take 12 stones. If you've ever stacked up Legos or blocks, they take 12 stones and make a stack of them in the middle of the Jordan River as a reminder. And so here they are on the other side of the Jordan River, and what city is in front of them but the great walled city of Jericho? Now, the city of Jericho has a wall. I think they say something like the wall is 40 feet thick and 40 feet high, and it goes all the way around the city. And the way that they made these walls is they were so big because people would actually live in them. So they would make a city out of the houses and out of the buildings and put stones to reinforce it. Because the city didn't start with a wall, but as the city became richer, they would build this wall. And so this wall seemed like something that could not be overcome. If you have a little brother or sister, or if you have a cat or a dog, you might see how sometimes your parents will put up a little fence. That this fence keeps a baby, keeps a toddler, keeps a cat or a dog, maybe not a cat, but a dog, from crossing from one side to the other. And so you have this little fence, and we can think of that like a wall. Maybe sometimes you've been out playing sports and you've thrown a ball over a fence. And because this ball is on the other side of the fence, you can't get to it because that fence serves as a wall, something that you cannot get past, you cannot get through. Sometimes maybe you have played war or fighting where you are up in a treehouse or up in a play ground and you're at the top. You have this wall around you and people are trying to climb into it, and it's very easy to keep them from getting up over the stairs into the play place. So we see this idea of a wall that is very difficult to overcome. And the people are thinking, how is it that we can take on this city? And so maybe their first thought was, we gather all of our troops and we just run toward this wall. Maybe they said, maybe we get some trees, we cut down some trees, we build some ladders, we build some stairs so that we can climb over this wall. But God has a different plan. He tells Joshua that the people should walk around the city for 7 days. And that on the 7th day, they should walk around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, all the people should yell. And all the priests should blow trumpets. So we see in this, we can think about our Shanini procession. We can think about other processions that we do throughout the year where we walk around a building. We can think about, how we can run laps at school, or run laps around a soccer field, or a baseball diamond, or a basketball court, or volleyball court. We run laps. But I'm sure most of you have never seen a wall or a building fall down because of walking laps around it. If you did, you would be in trouble when you walked around your neighborhood, because if you walked around your neighborhood for 7 days, all the houses would collapse. But that's not what happened. God was not giving them a strategy of how to defeat the city of Jericho. Rather, he was testing their faith. He was saying, do you believe me? If you do something, I will do something. So your parents might tell you, if you clean your room every week for a year, we will go to Disney World. Now, cleaning your room every week does not get you a Disney ticket. There's nothing in your room. You're not going to find tickets to Disney. You're not going to find airplane tickets. And if you clean your room for 50 weeks or 51 weeks, you're not 99% of the way to getting to Disney World. You are still 0%. There's still no chance. And even when you have gone that 52nd time, there is nothing different about cleaning your room that time than any of the other times. But your parents said, if you do this, I will do this in return. And so this is the idea of faith. This is the idea of a promise, of trust. So we have faith that our parents will tell us the truth. And so God was testing these people, his chosen people, to see if they would believe him. So even if they walked around the city for 6 days, and then on the 6th day, the 7th day, they walked around the city only 6 times, the wall would not be 99% knocked over. No, the wall would still be 100% up. It was only when they were obedient, only if they had faith that God would act. Now, in the gospel today, we hear the city of Jericho, we hear about a great crowd of people walking, and we hear about a man yelling. This man who is yelling is like the people who were yelling for the wall to come down. This great crowd of people walking were like those great crowds of people walking around the city of Jericho. And the city of Jericho that we read about in the gospel is like the city of Jericho that we read about at the beginning. And what happens? The people tell him to be silent, but he continues, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus asks him, "What would you like me to do for you?" And the man says, "I want to see." And what happens? The walls that are in front of his eyes fall. Those things that are blocking light from coming into his eyes, the sickness in his eyes, fall and light shines through. I'm sure you know that if you shine a flashlight on a wall, you don't get light on the other side. So Jesus, the light of the world, shines his light through, tears down this wall, and so this man is able to see because of his faith. Sometimes we might feel like we're cleaning our room and have been cleaning our room for 51 times, and we still don't see Disney World. We might feel that we've prayed for a year or for a week or for 10 years, and still we haven't heard God's prayers, God answer our prayers. Yet, if we have faith, if we have confidence in God that he will do what he has told us to do, then if we wait for him, he will answer our prayers. Now, a few words for the adults. If we look back at this city of Jericho, I talked about 3 different ways that we could conquer this city. The first is through brute force. The second is through using the plans of our own mind, using strategy, using thought and reason. The third way is through obedience to God and is entirely a gift to God. If we look at the gospel today, we hear the man crying, yelling. Then he has to use his mind. What is it that you would like me to do for me? He has to use reason. What is the answer to this question? And finally, there is a gift. There is something that is completely outside of himself, God giving him sight, Jesus healing his eyes. Now, the spiritual writers like to talk about 3 kinds of prayer. The first is vocal prayer. In vocal prayer, it is like using brute force. We are using the words of our lips. We say, okay, I'll pray on Our Father without thinking about what it is that I am saying. I'll pray a psalm without thinking about what it is that I am saying. Then you have mental prayer. Mental prayer is engaging our mind fully. And so in this idea, what we are praying, we are thinking about our Father who art in heaven. Wow, what does it mean that God is our Father? Hallowed be thy name. What does it mean to me, this name of God? What does it mean to me to keep the name of God holy? Or we think about this passage, the gospel that we read. In what way am I blind? This is this idea of mental prayer. And then there is the third form of prayer, a kind of prayer which is entirely a gift from God. It is like a miracle knocking down a wall so that we can enter into the heavenly city. It is like a miracle opening our eyes so that we can see the light. This kind of prayer we call contemplation. We call contemplation. We, of our own strength, cannot get to contemplation. But if we are faithful in our prayer, particularly in our mental prayer, in reflecting, in using our mind, in using our whole self to reflect on what it is that we are praying, what it is that we are saying, God, I am open. God is asking us, what is it that you want me to do for you? And we're saying, God, I want to see you. God, I want to see you face to face. God, I want to tear down the walls of my heart. And what we see in the spiritual writers is that in this faithfulness, not only to the prayer of our lips, but to the meditations, the thoughts, the reason of our mind, throwing our whole self into prayer and being faithful in that God is faithful and very often, very commonly gives us this gift of contemplative prayer. And it is this point that we begin to understand prayer. It is at this point that we begin to understand what faith is, what God's love for us is. This is not something that is reserved for priests or monks or nuns in their 80s. This is something that we see in the saints as little children, as young adults, as married people. This is something that God is calling all of us to open ourselves to receiving the gifts that he wants to give us. I hope that in this time where so many of us have a gift of time, this time when so many of us have an opportunity to reflect on our priorities, that we may choose God and our relationship with him as that number one priority, so that in his love we may do everything and we may be able to share his love with everyone.